A cowboy taught her to ride under the moon. She realized freedom feels like falling in love. A cowboy taught her to ride under the moon. She realized freedom feels like falling in love. The horse bolted before she even had both feet in the stirrups. Claire Dunn grabbed the saddle horn with both hands and held on with everything she had. The ground below her was moving, and the fence posts were blurring into a single white streak, and the night air was slapping her face hard enough to make her eyes water. The horse, a 17-hand chestnut named Copper, was not interested in her panic. Copper was interested in running. "Pull left," someone shouted from behind her. "Not with your whole body, your wrist, just your wrist." She pulled her wrist left. Copper swung left. The fence did not kill her. Claire Dunn exhaled something that was more prayer than breath. She had come to the Lander Ranch in Wyoming 3 weeks ago with one suitcase, a broken lease agreement, and a professional life that had dissolved the way sugar dissolves in rain. Fast and with nothing left to show for it, she had been the director of operations for a mid-sized logistics company in Denver. She had worn good shoes. She had known what every morning was going to look like before she opened her eyes. Then the company restructured. Then her apartment complex sold to a developer. Then her relationship of 4 years ended in a single 10-minute conversation over cold pasta, and the man across the table looked relieved in a way that told her the relief had been building for a long time. All of it collapsed in the same 6-week window. Her cousin Donna lived in Casper and had a friend who managed the Lander Ranch. The ranch took on seasonal workers in spring and summer. No experience necessary, the listing said. Willingness to learn, it said. Claire had stared at that phrase for a long time. Willingness to learn. She was 31 years old and she was not sure what she was willing for anymore, but she was willing for something that was not Denver. She drove 17 hours with her suitcase in the back seat and arrived at the ranch at dusk. The ranch was working land, cattle on 700 acres, a bunkhouse for workers, a main house up the hill, a barn that smelled like hay and iron and something living. There were 6 other seasonal workers already there. They were younger than her, mostly, and easier with the physical work in ways that made her arms ache just watching them. She learned to muck stalls. She learned to read the weather from the color of the western sky. She learned that boots that look good in a store will ruin your feet in a pasture, and she bought ugly boots from the supply shed and wore them every day. She did not learn to ride, not because no one offered, but because the horses at Lander were not backyard ponies. Copper was the gentlest of them, and Copper had nearly launched her over a fence on her first day when she'd walked up behind him without announcing herself. The ranch foreman had caught the lead rope and looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, but was very honest. "You announce yourself to a horse," he said, "same as you'd announce yourself walking into a room where somebody might not know you're coming." His name was Cal Burkett. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, lean in the way that outdoor work makes a person lean, with forearms that looked like they'd been put together by someone who knew what they were doing. He wore a hat that had seen better decades and did not seem bothered by this at all. He did not talk much. When he did talk, it was direct in a way that Claire had not experienced from a man in a long time. No softening, no performance. Just the thing he meant to say, said plainly. She found this unsettling in a way she could not immediately name. He had been running Lander for 6 years. Before that, rodeo. Before that, a family ranch in Montana that no longer existed in any form that mattered to him. He offered this information the way a person offers a receipt. "Here is the record. It is accurate. I don't need it back." Claire learned the land slowly. She learned which cattle were stubborn and which ones followed. She learned to work the gates, to carry herself in the pasture without looking like something that needed rescuing. She was not graceful at any of it. She was a woman who had spent a decade in conference rooms, and her body remembered that, and her hands blistered, and her back hurt in new places every morning. But something was happening under the discomfort. Something that felt like the opposite of the numb, managed life she had left in Denver. She felt her own heartbeat. Copper started coming to her at the fence on the 4th day. She had not approached him. He had approached her. He pressed his nose against the top railing and stood there, and she stood on the other side not knowing what to do, and then Cal was beside her, quiet as smoke, saying, "Hold your hand flat. Let him decide." She held her hand flat. Copper breathed against her palm, and the warmth of it went all the way up her arm and into her chest, and she did not understand why her eyes went hot, but they did. "He's deciding you're all right," Cal said. She could not look at Cal right then. "When do you think you'll let me ride him?" she asked. Cal considered this with the same seriousness he seemed to give everything. "End of the week," he said. "We'll start after sundown. Cooler, he's better in the cool." She nodded. She told herself it was practical. The end of the week came, and Copper bolted, and she held on, and Cal called the correction from behind her, and she turned the horse with her wrist alone, and she did not die. When Copper finally slowed to a walk, and the fence was far behind them, and the open field stretched out ahead in the last flat light of the day, Claire Dunn sat up in the saddle and felt the horse breathing under her, and felt the wind coming off the mountains, and felt absolutely nothing from her old life touching her. Not the lease agreement, not the 10-minute conversation, not the good shoes, nothing, just the horse under her and the sky above her and the sound of Cal's boots in the grass behind her walking to meet her where she'd stopped. "You okay?" he asked. She turned to look at him. "I've never been this okay," she said. He looked at her for a moment with something working behind his eyes, something he did not say out loud, and then he reached up and took Copper's bridle and walked them both back toward the barn, and Claire sat in the saddle and watched the first stars come out over Wyoming and did not try to name what was happening to her. She just let it happen, which was, for Claire Dunn, the most terrifying and necessary thing she had done in years. The first lesson under the moon happened because of a broken water line and a night neither of them had planned. Cal had been out past 10, managing a pump on the far pasture, when the pressure dropped across the whole north field. Claire had been the one to find it, making a last check of the water troughs the way she'd learned to before bed, and the trough at post 7 was bone dry, and the ground around the base was soft and dark. She hadn't called for help. She'd gone to get Cal herself, because that was the kind of thing she'd started doing at Lander, getting the right person rather than standing in front of problems waiting for someone else to move. Cal saw the ground, pulled 2 tools from his truck, and fixed the line in the dark with a headlamp and no commentary. Claire held the light where he needed it. Neither of them spoke much. The work had its own language by now. When he was done and the trough started filling, the moon was fully up. It came through the clouds the way it does in open country, not shy about it, just there, turning the whole field silver and quiet. Cal cleaned his hands on a rag and looked at the barn and then looked at Copper's paddock and then looked at Claire. "You want to take him out?" he asked. She had been riding for 2 weeks. She could walk and trot. She had cantered twice with Cal on the horse next to her, and both times she had held on more than ridden, but she had stayed upright. She was not ready, by any reasonable measure, to ride alone at night. "Yes," she said. Cal saddled Copper himself, and she watched his hands work the buckles in the moonlight, practiced and unhurried, each motion the same as the last because he'd done it 10,000 times and would do it 10,000 more. There was something about watching a person do what they were made for. She couldn't look away and she didn't try. He led Copper to the gate. "Same as always," he said. "Weight in your heels, soft hands. If he spooks, you go with him first, then redirect. Don't fight the horse, work with the horse." "I know," she said. "I know you know," he said. "I'm saying it because it's different at night." He cupped his hands for her foot, and she stepped up and swung into the saddle, and Copper shifted beneath her and settled. The moonlight made everything look like the inside of a dream. The grass was pale silver. The mountains were dark shapes against a dark sky with stars between them like something scattered by hand. Cal walked beside her for the first quarter mile, one hand loose near the lead even though he wasn't holding it. Present but not controlling, available but not hovering. She noticed this. She had been noticing a lot of things about Cal Burkett. He was not like the men she had known in Denver. That wasn't a criticism of Denver. It was just a fact she kept arriving at. The men she had known spoke about feeling things more than they felt them. They were articulate about growth and change, and they stayed exactly the same. Cal did not talk about himself unless she asked, and when she asked he answered simply, and then he went back to the work or the silence, and the silence with him was not uncomfortable. It was the first comfortable silence she had experienced with another person in 4 years. She urged Copper into a trot, and Cal dropped behind, and she felt the shift of the horse under her and the rush of cool air, and the way the ground moved differently at speed, and she thought about her office in Denver, her desk with its neat stacks, the controlled temperature, and the controlled vocabulary and the controlled everything, and she thought about how she had called that living. Copper slowed where the field narrowed near the creek, and Claire let him, and she sat in the saddle looking at the water, catching moonlight, and felt something she had no ready word for. Not happiness exactly. Not peace. Something wilder than peace. Something with an edge on it. Something that felt like a door she had not known was locked, opening. Cal came up beside her and stopped. They stood there in the moonlight, horse and rider and the man who'd taught her, and the creek ran its low sound through the grass, and neither of them said anything for a long moment. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "Fix water lines? Stay out here, the ranch, all of it." He looked at the mountains. "Because out here," he said, "everything you feel is real. The cold is real, the work is real, the horse under you is real." He paused. "In other places I've been, things get fake in ways you don't notice until you've been away from them long enough." Claire stared at the creek. She knew exactly what he meant. She had been living inside something fake for a very long time and had called it her life. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. Whatever was before, he thought about it. He took his time the way he took time with everything. "I miss certain people," he said. "I don't miss who I was with them." She wanted to ask more. She didn't. The night was doing something to her restraint. Copper stamped his foot and tossed his head, and she reached forward and pressed her palm to his neck the way Cal had shown her, steady pressure, and the horse settled. Cal watched this. "You've got good hands," he said. It was a straightforward thing, a ranch observation, nothing more. But something about the plainness of it, the absence of flattery or manipulation, the way it was simply true and he simply said it, made her chest pull tight in a way she wasn't prepared for. "Let's canter back," he said. "In the dark. Copper knows the field better than either of us. Trust him." She looked at the long, silver stretch of grass ahead of her. She looked at the dark and the distance and the unknown and the beautiful, terrible openness of it. "Okay," she said. She touched her heels to Copper's sides. Copper moved. And for a long, spinning, wide-awake moment, Claire Dunn could not tell the difference between riding and flying, and she laughed out loud into the dark. And the sound of it startled her because she could not remember the last time she had laughed and meant every single part of it. Behind her she heard Cal laugh too, just once, quiet, like he'd been waiting for exactly that sound. The third week at Lander, the storms came. Wyoming spring does not negotiate. It arrives with wind first, cold that has no politeness in it, and skies that turn the color of old iron before the rain comes sideways. The seasonal workers learned this. The new ones always thought they'd weathered storms before. They hadn't. Not like this. Claire was in the south pasture when the sky changed. She had been moving a section of temporary fencing with 2 other workers. A quiet man named Derek who had worked the ranch 3 seasons, and a young woman named Patty who was 19 and from Ohio, and had come to Wyoming because her older brother had dared her to, and she had never backed down from a dare in her life. Claire had come to like Patty in the way you like people who haven't learned yet to edit their own enthusiasm. The wind hit first. Patty's hat went 30 feet in 4 seconds. Then the temperature dropped 8 degrees in the time it took Claire to say Derek's name. Derek looked at the sky and did not say anything dramatic. He just said, "We move now." They moved. The fence poles went in the truck, unfinished, and Derek drove and Claire held the door against the wind. And Patty sat in the middle and watched the sky with her eyes wide and pleased because she was 19 and the sky was enormous, and she had not yet learned to be afraid of enormous things. By the time they reached the barn, the rain was sheets. Cal was already inside. He had the horses stalled and the barn doors down to the last foot of opening, and he was moving with the steady efficiency Claire had come to recognize as his version of urgency. No wasted motion, no performance, just the fastest path between what needed doing. "Everyone accounted for?" he asked Derek. Derek confirmed it. Everyone was in. The storm took 3 hours. It shook the barn walls and dropped hail on the metal roof in a sound like 1,000 dropped coins and turned the yard outside into standing water. The workers sat on hay bales and on overturned buckets and talked in the easy, nowhere-to-be way of people who are stuck together and have stopped pretending otherwise. Patty asked Cal how he'd known the storm was coming. He pointed at the southwest corner of the sky visible through the small barn window. "The color," he said, "and the cattle, they were moving east 2 hours ago." Patty stared at him. "You read cattle, you read what you live with," he said. Claire was watching Cal while he said it, watching his face in the flat storm-gray light, the unhurried way he held himself even when everything outside was in motion. She thought about what it meant, what he had said. You read what you live with. She thought about the things she had lived with in Denver that she had never learned to read. The exhaustion that she'd called productivity. The loneliness she'd called independence. The slow erosion of herself that she had managed and optimized and scheduled right up until there was nothing left to schedule. She had not read any of it, not until it was gone. The storm broke near sundown and left the sky washed clean and the air smelling like cold water and wet sage. The mountains appeared out of the clouds as if placed there fresh. Everyone stepped outside. Patty spread her arms and turned her face up to the last light and grinned, and Claire watched her and felt something soft and sad and warm about the girl's unguarded joy, the way she had not yet built walls around the good things. Cal came to stand near Claire at the edge of the barn overhang. "Storm didn't get in," he said. "No," she said. "It didn't." They stood without talking for a moment, a comfortable silence but different than the ones before, tighter, charged with something unspoken. "I want to ask you something," Claire said. "All right. Do you ever feel like you disappeared somewhere along the way?" she asked. "Like you went through a stretch of your life and when you came out the other side you were less of the person you started as?" He was quiet for a long time. "Yeah," he said, "I know that feeling. What did you do about it?" He looked at the mountains the way he always looked at things he was taking seriously. "Came out here," he said, "and stayed long enough to remember what I was before whatever happened." Claire turned to look at him. "Does it work?" He turned to look at her. "Takes time," he said, "and you have to be willing to feel what you push down. That part's the hard part." She held his gaze. The light was the kind that makes everything look true. "I haven't cried since the day I left Denver," she said. "Not once, and a lot happened." He didn't try to fix it. He didn't reassure her or tell her it was fine or offer a solution. He just looked at her with a steadiness she felt like a hand on her shoulder. "It'll come," he said. "Things don't stay down forever." Copper was looking at them from the nearest stall, his dark eyes catching the last light, his breathing steady and even. Claire watched the horse and felt the exact moment when the thing she had been holding came loose. It started in her throat, then her chest. She turned away from Cal and faced the open field and let it happen, not loudly, not dramatically, but real in the way that Cal had said real things are out here. All of it came in one long, shapeless wave. Denver, the cold pasta, the relieved face, the good shoes. The dead-end mornings, all of it. Cal stood beside her and did not say a word. When it passed and she wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket and turned back to the field, he was still there. "Better?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. Copper stamped his foot in the stall. She laughed, then he laughed, and the sun went down on Wyoming and took the last of Denver with it. The night it all changed, Claire almost missed it. It was the last week of June. The season was nearing its end. The summer workers would begin leaving in another 10 days, back to colleges or other towns or other versions of their lives that had been waiting patiently in the background. Claire had a flight booked. She had sent 3 emails to contacts in Denver about positions. She had a plan, the way she had always had a plan, and the plan made sense and was responsible and felt like pulling on clothes that no longer fit her body. She had not told Cal about the flight. He had not asked. But he had noticed her silence over dinner 2 nights running, and she had seen him notice it, and the fact that he noticed without pressing had made the silence worse. Copper was restless that night. Claire went to check on him near 9 because she could not sleep, and the night was clear, and the stars over Wyoming in late June are not like stars anywhere else. They are too close and too many, and they make a person feel small in the best way, like being small is an invitation rather than a diminishment. Cal was already at the paddock fence. Of course he was. He was leaning on the top rail with his arms crossed and his hat pushed back, and he was looking at Copper, but not the way you look at an animal you're evaluating. The way you look at something you trust. "Couldn't sleep either," Claire said. "Never sleep much," he said. She came to stand at the fence beside him, close but not touching, and Copper moved to them from across the paddock, unhurried, his hooves quiet in the soft ground. "I have a flight," she said. "I know," he said. She looked at him. "How?" "The way you've been looking at things. Like you're taking inventory before a move." She hadn't known she was doing that. She had been doing that. Copper reached them and pressed his nose to Claire's arm, and she lifted her hand without thinking and stroked the broad flat of his face, and he closed his eyes. "I don't know if I should go," she said. Cal said nothing. She had learned that his silences were not indifference, they were respect. He was letting her speak without the pressure of his opinion, and she both loved and hated this about him. The flight makes sense, she said. I have skills, I have experience, I can rebuild what I had. Can, he said, just the one word, not agreeing, not disagreeing. But I don't know if I want to rebuild it, she said. I don't know if what I had is what I want. Copper exhaled against her palm, warm and real. What do you want? Cal asked. The question sat in the air, simple, no cushion around it. She looked at the mountains. She thought about what she had been 4 months ago. The controlled mornings and the managed silences and the way she had learned over years to want only things that were achievable, because wanting things that were uncertain was too expensive. She looked at Cal. He was looking back. Not with the studied neutrality he used with workers or the foreman's careful distance he maintained most of the time. With something open in his face that she had not seen before or had seen and filed away without examining. I want the thing that feels real, she said. The cold, he said. The cold, she agreed. They were both quiet. Copper moved along the fence slowly, grazing, his presence a steady anchor. The ranch takes on year-round workers, Cal said. Not many positions, but they come up. Her heart moved in her chest in a way she did not try to interpret. Is that an offer? She said. It's information, he said. She turned to look at him fully. He was watching her with that same open expression, the one that said, I am not going to manage this or pace it or make it easier. I am just going to tell you the true thing. I think it might be more than information, she said. He looked at the mountains for a moment. Yeah, he said, it might be. She laughed, short and real, and he smiled at the fence rail, and Copper came back to them and stood between them like punctuation. She did not cancel the flight that night. She sat with it. She sat with all of it. The woman she had been, and the woman she was becoming, and the space between them that she had crossed on horseback under a Wyoming moon. She sat with the knowledge that choosing something real means choosing uncertainty. And uncertainty was the one thing she had spent a decade engineering out of her life, and the one thing that, it turned out, made her feel like herself. In the morning, she went to the main house and knocked on Cal's door. He opened it. He looked at her. He waited. I want to know about the year-round position, she said. Something settled in his face. The kind of settling that happens in a person when a thing they'd been holding gets to put its weight down. Come in, he said. I'll make coffee. She crossed the threshold. Wyoming was loud with birds and morning and the smell of rain-wet sage through the open window. And Copper was moving in the paddock below. And Claire Dunn stood in the kitchen of a ranch house in the middle of the country she had driven to with a broken lease and a suitcase. And she felt her own heartbeat, and it was the beat of someone who had stopped running from the unknown and started running toward it. Cal set the coffee on. She sat at the table. Outside, Copper lifted his head and looked at the mountains. The morning was just beginning, and for the first time in longer than she could trace, so was she.